Hello and welcome to a video with me, Raindale. And today we'll be taking a look at the Final Fantasy X units, what they're bringing to the game that is new, and then whether it's worth it to invest in them or not, depending on what your account has. Yesterday was the anniversary live stream, and they announced a bunch of super cool stuff. Other channels are covering this, so I won't make a video on that. But I do want to mention that they confirmed that Final Fantasy X is coming. They confirmed that Tidus is going to be released and given out for free. So along with the other units that won't be free though. And then everything we were expecting basically has been confirmed. And there is one addition. The water exclusive UR Vision card that is going to be released will have a global exclusive buff where Tidus specifically is going to get more defense piercing rate up and accuracy up. So he's going to be even stronger than what was originally released in JP, and even there he was still already very good. So let's start diving into those units, kids, and see whether they're a good investment or not. And we'll begin with Tidus. It was pointed out to me that I was mispronouncing it. I was saying Tidus, and apparently it is Tidus. So I'll try not to make a mistake throughout the video, but I might slip the old habit once in a while. And the first thing I want to point out is that these units are the first that are going to be released with EX jobs. And we will take a look at their stats at level 120. It's not exactly fair to all the existing units because just the fact that those new units are higher level means that they have a ton of extra stats. But since it will be their actual real capabilities, I think we need to take it into account and look at those as is. So we've never seen before Tidus units having over 500 points of attack. It's just way above the mark of anything that we have right now. But with EX jobs coming along, all our standards will have to be updated as we go. Overall though, from what I've understood, he still has very decent HP and attack even for a EX job unit, and he's pretty fast as well. 67 agility is very decent. Tidus is a powerful attacker that has really nice buffs and debuffs that he can apply to the enemy team, and that is also reasonably tanky. So he's kind of a good frontline fighter in general. He has a unique job, and then paladin and samurai. So looking at his stats overall, he, as I mentioned, has pretty good attack. He also has a interesting amount of defense and okay resistances. He's only weak to magic, but 10% weakness is not the end of the world. So he's there to stay on the field for a while. He has a master ability that increases all of the water allies, and he's a really strong water unit himself. With what we've been getting lately, water has become a really strong element, and will be even more so if we get Winter Victora's EX job shortly, because she was released among the first EX jobs in JP, so hopefully we'll get it rather early instead of late. Tidus also has some defense penetration innately. 20% is not incredible, but it's something that he gets for free, so it's still pretty good. It means that he's able to do some damage to high defense enemies because all of his attacks are physical, so without defense penetration he could be blocked by defense a lot. Now, looking at his support abilities, a lot of Tidus's kit revolves around critting. He has some debuffs that can only proc if he lands a crit. So he's a unit that has a lot of affinity with critical hit rate. So he can increase agility and crit rate. He has a couple things. What I am the most interested there and what I would probably run on him is the first two. So give him some more agility so he can act faster and have more crit rate, and then give him defense and HP because those are just always good. If you wanted to trade the extra agility for more damage, then his third one is also pretty good with attack and crit damage. That's just going to make his damage quite a bit higher. he has an interesting new counter ability that has a chance to inflict Berserk at a range. That one, if it procs, will be really powerful. One thing though, these status effect counters are not as reliable as you might think. Yes, whenever you get hit, you have a 50% chance to proc them if the enemy's in range, but then you still have to roll the status effect chance, so it's kind of a double dip. You need to proc the counter, then the status effect needs to land. So the chances of it actually making an enemy berserk overall are pretty low. Still though, it's a unique mechanic, and it will win you a couple fights if you're lucky. And then otherwise, I would probably equip Paladin Guard, just because being able to reduce physical damage by almost half once, possibly, or twice in a fight can be a pretty big difference. His Limit Burst, I'll just quickly say, is a chaining move, so it's interesting. It has a super high AP cost and doesn't deal an incredible amount of damage with a lot of other utility. So the main reason you would use it would really be to build a chain for other water units, possibly, or other slash units. And in that sense, it's pretty cool. We don't really have a lot of 4-hit abilities in the game yet, so and it certainly is our first for slashing. So it's very interesting for that. His main kit is unique. He has a couple really nice things if you want to build him. His first attack is just a basic ranged hit with a lot of crit chance. If you get him to EX Job, it becomes a guaranteed crit, so that's nice. That might be some incentive to run the extra crit damage passive on him, because you know this is just going to hit harder. He can increase attack for allies and then defense as well. Not as much as Thancred, but he does it in a AoE, so that's very interesting and stronger in a way than Thancred's ability is. Then he can cast Haste in an AoE as well. So as a support for your team, he's already providing a ton of utility, not even counting his own damage. Then he has an attack that has a chance to slow if it crits. That's interesting. That's the main reason why I would say having crit rate on him is really good, because it's a 50% chance to land the slow. So that's really high. If you're running Tidus with high faith and hit an enemy with high faith, chances are it's almost going to be a guaranteed slow, again, if he crits. So it's very interesting. And if you've used Kain and his Limit Burst, you know just how impactful being able to slow an enemy is. It's one of the stronger status effects in my opinion. Then he has an attack that decreases the enemy's CT and increases his agility. That's interesting, but not the end of the world. Then, in my opinion, I think that his EX Jobs is really powerful, mainly because it gives him access to this new move, which decreases defense. And without this, Tidus has no way of dealing with high defense enemies. He has 20% defense penetration, but that's not super high. But if you do get him all the way to 120 and give him this new ability, he'll be able to decrease defense, and then ignore 20% of whatever's left. So that allows him to fight a broader range of targets, attacking high defense enemies, and then even for enemies with low defense, a flat decrease like this can actually take defense below 0 and amplify damage for all your team. So it's not a waste in any case. His sub job for I'm not sure what it's called, but let's say for his unique job, isn't incredible in my opinion. He gets the ability to move to a target and hit them, and then increase his critical damage. That's cool, but his other sub-jobs are really good, so it's kind of a tough call. And then he can hit and have a chance to sleep the enemy if he lands a crit, which is also pretty cool, but it's hard to compare when you have the option of running him as a paladin. Paladin gives him the ability to make himself more tanky through the use of Saintly Wall. On top of the other really nice buffs that he can cast on his friends, and that's a really powerful one. And then it would allow him to be ran as a tank, generating hate, possibly, if you wanted to do that. It's also his only way to get AoE attacks, because otherwise everything in his main kit, in terms of attacks, are single target. So he's a really good single target damage dealer, and if you're running Paladin, you're giving him a couple new options here, where he can possibly hit several people at once. In his Samurai Sub Job, he could also hit several people with Kongo, the final move at the bottom, which hits in the line, but it's much tougher and has less range, so it's less reliable than what the Paladin job would provide. I don't think you'll run the Samurai job very often, except maybe for the Devotion buff, which increases critical hit rate, if you really wanted to land his status effects from his main job afterwards. But it is there. It's still an interesting sub job because it also gives him access to some evasion if you wanted to run him in those teams. So that's it for Tidus. Overall, what I'll say is he's a very strong attacker. Single target mainly, but very strong. He has a ton of utility for your team, like good buffs and then debuffs that he can land on the enemy team as well. He could serve as a tank or a bruiser with his Paladin job, and then just in general, the fact that he has some innate defense, he can be very tanky to physical at least. And then water now is a pretty strong element. We have Winter Victora, Glaciela that's really good, Ildira. There's a lot of good choices to play in terms of water units, so his master ability will come in handy. And then in Japan, he was handed out for free, so you don't have the risk of not pulling or the investment that it would get you to pull. You just have to get his shards, so you're saving a little bit there. Then drawbacks, I would guess, is that he's weak to magic, and in Japan there will be a ton of powerful magic characters, including Yuna, that's going to be released at the same time as Tidus. Yuna will be hitting him very, very hard, so that's something to take into account. And also, he's weak to lightning, and there will be another handout unit, which is 9S, that's going to be lightning a very short time after Tidus is released, if, again, we follow JP's schedule. So that is something to keep in mind. Since it's going to be another free unit, you're likely to run into a lot of counters to Tidus if you invested into him. Now, let's take a look at the second unit. I would say that's probably the most hyped of the lot, and that is Yuna. Yuna is, I think, the best healer, or at least the best unit at making sure that your team remains on the battlefield for as long as possible. She's really strong in that regard, and then she has a ton of high-powered magic attacks that are also guaranteed hits. So she's overall a really strong unit. She's also pretty tough to remove from the battlefield as long as her counter ability procs, because her counter ability will essentially bring her back to max HP. She could be countered in several ways, but overall, I would say she was, upon release, a very dominant unit in JP. She has a lot less HP, obviously, than someone like Tidus. She has a ton of magic and a pretty decent speed, though, so she's very fast, and she is resistant to Charm and Silence, which are two status effects that would really hinder her quite a bit, so that's something to take into account. She doesn't have any incredible resistances, so slightly resistant to magic, but she's going to be run with High Faith, so she's still going to take a lot of magic damage. And then she increases the HP and light attack for light allies, and has some area resistance herself, and that's pretty good because nowadays I find most units have AoE attacks, and I see single target attacks a lot less than in the early days of the game, so I think area resistance is very important now. In terms of passives, she has quite a few. I think that if you're running Yuna, you probably want to run her first passive, which gives magic and healing power, because healing is most of what she does. She's there as a great healer that can also attack very well, but at her core, her main role is to make sure that the rest of your team remains on the battlefield for a long time. Her other abilities, she could go for a ton of magic, but I actually really like the Emerald Echo. That means you could run some niche TMRs which give only 1 turn duration buffs on her, so that she provides those with your allies, or just generally make her buffs last longer. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with going for some spirit or some magic, depending on the matchups that you're going into. So you have a lot of good options there. Her counter ability, I think you kind of have to run the one that's in her main job. It counters, every time you take damage, you have a chance to increase healing power, and then if you've taken Yuna to EX job, which you definitely should do if you pull for her, you're also healing yourself back. But that heal, coupled with her increased healing power from that counter proc and her mastery, her passive that you've equipped, means that she's often going to go back all the way to full HP. And EX job units have a lot of HP, so going back to full means that it's going to take a couple more hits before she goes down, thus giving it more chance that another proc of this counter will happen. So that's part of the reason why she's hard to remove from the battlefield. Her limit break is a AoE attack with 100% hit. That's really strong. We don't really have those in Global. In JP, there was Summer Lilith that had a barrage in a 100% hit chance, but right now, the guaranteed hit abilities in Global, I believe, are all single target, or at least the vast majority of them. And so she's going to bring one that's a large AoE and a guaranteed hit, and that can be very troublesome for evade teams, especially because a lot of evade teams are dark units. So since it's a light attack, it's going to take them out almost every time. So looking at her main job, she has a ton of heals. Her first one is interesting because it's a AoE heal that's instant. If you take a look, it does not have a cast time. Then she has some attacks that are pretty interesting. She has the equivalent of Kiraga, I believe, so that's going to give a lot of HP. She's got Holy, which is super strong, and then with her EX job it gets Dark Killer on top to really say no to any dark character that would try to oppose her. But her most iconic ability is the ability to grant an auto-revive. So the same as you've seen on Halloween Ryryu's TMR, and she can cast that on an ally once per fight. Then, if you take her all the way to level 120, she also gets access to full life. So yeah, she can make sure that your team just stays alive or comes back to life if they die. That's really powerful. I don't think you'll ever use her summoner, I guess, sub job, because all she gets is raise, which is really worse than full life anyways, and then some other single target heal, which isn't too impactful when you have access to everything she already has. What I think people will probably run is the Kotodama Wielder job. Now, Green Mage has a couple interesting options. If you're fighting opposite light teams, you could use the increased light resistance. Otherwise, she has access to Imperial, which deals a decent damage in an AoE and then decreases all element resistances, thus increasing the damage from everyone else on your team. So that's pretty interesting too. But in her Kotodama Wielder job, she can increase her own mobility, and she has access to a couple new things. Like she can possibly confuse, she can move and attack, and she gets another super large AoE attack, which is in the same pattern as a horizontal shot from the dual gunner job, so the huge cone. So I think overall this is more likely to be useful for in a lot of scenarios. So at that point, what's our verdict about Yuna? Well, obviously she's a super strong unit. I think she's unrivaled as a healer, not because of her ability to straight up heal, but because she can revive and then grant a auto-revive on top, and because she's hard to remove from the battlefield. Most healers in the game right now are pretty squishy. She's not. The difference in levels and in just max HP in her base HP is so impressive that it's harder to kill her, and that means that she can heal that much more before going down herself. Then she has a ton of guaranteed hit attacks, and that's pretty important against evasion teams. So it's fun when your healer is the one who counters evasion, because that means you don't have to think about that for the rest of your loadout. And then she can make use of the Bahamut Vision card, which is going to be super strong for light units and especially for light mages. It's basically tailored towards her, and if you do go for that vision card in that Esper, she is going to be very, very powerful thanks to it. Now, it is a double cost vision card though, so keep that in mind. It's a pretty heavy investment. In terms of drawback, I would say there are two. The first one is she can only use magic attacks, so it is possible to counter her using magic resistance builds and then possibly using effects that decrease healing. But still, she's very powerful. And then she's going to be very popular. That means that you will run into teams that are built to counter Yuna, because since she's going to be probably everywhere, well, people will learn how to fight her and plan accordingly. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's take a look at our third and last unit, Auron. He's also super interesting. He has a ton of HP, he has some defense and some spirit. He's slower than Tidus and Yuna, but he has a ton of attack as well. So he's a super hard-hitting unit with a lot of defense penetration in his kit, so he's able to hit anyone, basically, for a ton of damage. And he has some counter shenanigans that he can do, like Pugilist. He is a Pugilist among other things, but he has his own unique job, like the other guys as well, and Soldier. So he can reach a super high total attack. And then he's resistant to disable in terms of status effects, so that's pretty good as well. So he overall is a bulky attacker if we just look at his stats, but what does he have that makes him unique? Well, if we quickly take a look at his support abilities, well, he can gain 40% defense penetration, so that's one thing. And then, depending on what you want to run, you can make him hit harder, or you can improve one of his counter abilities. And if we look down here, his base job, well, first thing, all his counter abilities are counter attacks that hit adjacent enemies. I am not the biggest fan of those, because often when you're getting attacked in War of the Vision, you're getting attacked by somebody who's not right next to you. Most offensive moves have more than 1 square of range. But when he does get attacked by somebody adjacent, he has a chance to counter these attacks. And then the one from his main job deals ice / damage and reduces defense. That's super strong. Or you could go for the Pugilist counter, which deals less, deals the same amount of damage, does not decrease defense, but instead is a 2-hit chain. So depending on what you want, both can be very powerful. And having a counter ability that decreases defense is really interesting. It's something rather unique. So yeah, he has a couple good options there. And then when we're looking at his main job, it's mainly a job oriented around buffing himself and doing damage. He does not have a ton of range. What he does have, though, is the ability to increase his accuracy, his crit rate, and his defense penetration all in one. So he's able to go and increase his damage even more. He has a guaranteed hit ability, and then he can break physical barriers. So you can put him against basically anyone. Against tanks, he'll break their barriers and then ignore their defense. Against evasion units, he's going to use his guaranteed hit ability. So he's really reliable in terms of dealing damage. Like, there's nobody really that he can't deal damage to if he has the right buffs. And that's something that's really interesting about him. Now, his buffs are only to himself, though, so you have to keep in mind he doesn't provide much to the rest of your team. If he dies, then all the buffing he did goes to waste. So you need to make sure that he remains on the field and keeps attacking in order to pay out. Then his level 120 ability deals a lot of damage and has a chance to paralyze. I don't think that this is his most important ability. So that's pretty good, because you don't necessarily have to take him all the way to 120 to get a lot of value out of him. Tidus gets a great ability at 120 that I think is important to his kit, whereas this ability from Auron, sure, it's his attack with the highest modifier, but the other moves are still very good, so it's not a must for him to be worth using. His main unique job's sub job is interesting as well. He gets a pretty strong break, and then the ability to cast regen. But I don't think that this will be super impactful compared to his other jobs. And then his limit burst is another really powerful attack that gives him 40 defense penetration. So if you're following me here, with this and then his support ability that gives him 40 defense pen, he can buff himself all the way to 80% without a specific weapon or anything else giving him the rest. So yeah, he's super good at taking out tanky targets as well. Then he can be either a pugilist or a soldier. Pugilist, I think, is going to be the most fun one because it provides him with an alternate damage type. Without that, all he can do is slashing attacks. And there's a lot of slash resistance gear and options in the game right now. So by giving him access to 2 damage types, you can kind of again, increase your capability to deal damage to a wide variety of targets. It also gives him some defensive buffs, so he has some really powerful offensive buffs in his main job, and this Pugilist sub job gives him the option to increase his defense a little bit. Then you could also run him as a soldier, and what you're really getting out of this is the hazard break, I think. So his 225% modifier attack in an AoE, that's going to be the strongest possible attack in his kit, even harder hitting than his limit break. So if you want him to do the most powerful amount of damage in a single hit, the soldier job would be the one for him. Overall, what I'm thinking about him is that he has impressive bulk for an attacker, and then he has crazy attacks, defense penetration, guaranteed hit, and barrier breaks. As an attacker, I don't see what else I could be asking out of him. Like, he can do it all, so he's really reliable for that. Then he can also use strike attacks if he's fighting slash resistance teams, and you could run funky counter builds using either his slash counter that decreases defense or his 2-hit counter from the pugilist job, and both are interesting. So I could see myself trying to do some shenanigan builds where he goes in right next to the enemy and then makes sure that they're attacking him so that he gets some counters off. His drawbacks, I would say, is that he has very short range in most of his abilities, so he is going to get in the enemy's face. And then, most of all, his buffs are really oriented for himself. Aside from pugilistic mastery, or the ability to give regen to allies if you're running his unique job's sub job, he does not cast buffs on anyone but himself. That means that the second he goes down, everything he would have provided to your team is out with him. So keep that in mind. He is not an enabler, he's a carry. By himself, he's going to attack and deal damage. Overall, what's my verdict? It's a pretty tough choice, and I would say it depends on your account and depends on your nostalgia factor, possibly. Tidus is a great unit to build. He has a ton of utility, and to whoever doesn't go and pull the other guys, I would recommend they at least get him to 89 or 99 so they can get access to that super cool AoE haste and then defense buff. He has really nice tools that we haven't seen on other units yet, and I think he's really worth going for. Then if you want to invest in the other units, I would take a look at my account and look at what I need, I guess. Yuna provides some very unique healing options, and overall is a very bulky healer. If you don't have a healer that you're using yet, or you want some new mage that can do it all, or just do it a little bit better, and Yuna definitely is the right choice. She is super strong. Auron, I think, is undervalued. He has a very reliable way to do damage, as I mentioned. He can hit just about anyone super hard. And that's something that's unique. Most attackers in the game have their weak spots where they can't fight an enemy with barriers very well, or they can't fight an enemy with a lot of defense very well. And he doesn't have those weaknesses. He can go against just about anyone and then destroy them. So he's very interesting. The main reason why I don't necessarily want to recommend him, though, is because we have a lot of damage dealing units in the game right now. So there are very high chances that you already have a ton of damage dealers and possibly ice damage dealers. So if you have those, then is what he's bringing to the table that much different from what you already have? Not necessarily. So again, you could take a look at that. If I had the chance to just pull all three, I would be thrilled because they're all super cool. But we're going to have a lot of other nice stuff coming in the near future. I'm looking at the JP timeline and everything seems appealing to me. So keep in mind that whatever you don't build now, you're not lucking your account out of getting it forever. This event will quite likely rerun in the future, and then you're also just going to have the chance to invest the vision ore that you're saving on those units and other super cool stuff that are going to be coming out afterwards. So that was it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed your time, please like and subscribe. It will make it more likely that you see my videos in the future. And then, as always, thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.